We should respect the dead. That's what my family always told me. We need to let the dead rest is something I would always hear at every funeral or after hearing somebody had died. My grandma always told me once somebody was dead, we had to let them free to find their path. Letting them free means to learn how to deal with and just accept things, not to try and make contact with them otherwise. They'd be stuck in limbo and not be able to rest. I've heard many people that share the same views, but of course, there's always people who believe the opposite. There's the kind of people who want to know what's beyond, the kind of people who mess with Ouija boards and those sort of things, and the kind of people who feel affinity and attraction for the dead, and also some that even worship it. My family was actually divided by those two kinds of people. I was always someone who stood in the middle ground. I did have curiosity for what happens after you die, but it wasn't the biggest deal to me. I wasn't going to try anything to contact the other side. When I was younger, my sisters and my cousins will always speak about ghosts. I would even make up my own stories to be able to keep up with them. I'd comment on different paranormal things that I had no idea of. And I remember when we first experienced the death of someone close to us. The death of Darna, our grandmother's best friend, who was always at Grandma's and would constantly babysit us when our parents or Grandma weren't available. All my cousins claim they saw her in their dreams. And I'm pretty sure even one of my sisters claimed to have seen the ghost around Grandma's house, just once. But for me, since Darna had gone, she was only in my memories. And even though I know many people, especially the young ones, make things up when it comes to these kinds of topics, there are many people who actually have the ability to see and communicate to the dead. People such as mediums, for example. And I'm pretty sure you know what a prayer is. I mean, many people pray to God or gods, saints, or whatever they believe in. And they normally pray hoping for a miracle to happen. Well, some people pray to the dead. Many even claim that asking the dead for a wish is something very effective. For me, doing what always sounded a little bit tasteless and even stupid. And I understand why people had different coping mechanisms, but going as far as to almost proclaim your dead relative or friend a god? Well, that's not too healthy. I was also raised in a very religious environment. My family is Catholic, and I still consider myself Catholic to this day, and we're rather traditional. Not fanatic, just a bit old-fashioned for nowadays. And I guess you could say I've always have been a very normal person. Nothing out of the ordinary happened to me. And it's not like my life is boring as hell. It's just that, well, it's been a pretty normal life. I've had my good and bad moments like everybody else, which, if you think about it, it's kind of good. But there's one event that is out of the ordinary. At first, I didn't give it too much thought, but the more I think about it, the more I know it wasn't just my imagination or a dream. To give you a little better insight of the story, I'm going to have to tell you a little bit about my family. In this case, my dad's family. I've always been very close to my family, but that shouldn't be a surprise considered I already mentioned that we were rather traditional people. My family is huge. I have many cousins, uncles, and aunts. And even though my parents divorced, which is not too traditional, but it's pretty normal nowadays, my sisters, my mom, and I often hang out with his side of the family. Well, even perhaps more than him. But my dad had many siblings. The youngest one was called Aaron. He was the coolest uncle you could ask for. He was open-minded, funny, outgoing, intelligent, and he was passionate. Ladies often describe him as handsome, and everybody remembers him as a good person. He had such a life ahead of him. But tragically, he died in a car accident when I was a teenager. It was believed one of his friends was drunk driving. He was in his late 20s when he passed away. And some years passed, and I went to the university where I started dating a guy who, after a few years, became my husband. I got married and had a child at a young age, and technically as soon as I finished my studies, actually. But when my daughter was 3 years old, my granddad passed away. He died in his sleep, and we like to think it was peaceful. When my granddad died, we were all very sad, but things seemed to move forward rather fast. I mean, even Grandma got over his death pretty quick. But we simply thought he was now in a better place, and we didn't have any uneasy feelings. My sister, Sarah, she's the middle sister, and the one who's the most different to me. She always coped with things a little different. Sarah is 5 years younger than me. She was not alive when Darna, Grandma's neighbor, died, and when Uncle Aaron died, she was really young as well. So by the time our granddad died, she was just over 18, and she dealt with things a little different. When I previously mentioned people praying to the dead, Sarah was one of them. She would pray to God, which, according to her, it was in order to help Granddad's soul. And she would speak to Granddad, which is also normal. We all have spoken to somebody who has already passed. But the thing is, she started asking him for things. We didn't really tell her anything because at the time, we didn't think she was doing anything bad. It's not like she was crazy or anything. As many others, she just tried to keep their memory. Maybe not in a way my grandma, mom, and I would do, but anyways. After some time, our younger sister, Rachel, started to do the same. She started asking things from Granddad as well. They didn't really do it all the time, just from time to time. And inside of me, I always thought it was a bit silly, but I respected them and let them do their things. Sometimes, during family meetings, my cousins will speak about how certain people who had passed away appeared in their dreams. Normally, they were described as sweet or good dreams rather than nightmares. And I found this very interesting, for it never happened to me. I often had dreams, pretty much every other night, and at least 85% of the times I was able to remember almost everything. Well, or at least the important details. But I never, ever had a dream about dead relatives. And I started to think, I wish I could have a dream about my granddad or about my uncle. Hearing other people speaking about a dream where they went to the movies with them or went for a dinner or simply spoke to them seemed, I don't know, just so rewarding. I would hear many people even saying that when they have dreamed about a dead relative, they could communicate during the dream. And I wanted to speak to my relatives once again, even if I didn't pray to them or saw them as my guardian angels and those sort of things. So I low-key hoped that they would appear in my dreams. 4 years passed by, and my life was still the same. Still working, still with my husband, and still having an amazing time with my lovely daughter who was growing strong. Everybody in my family was doing okay. But then, my grandma got sick. Grandma started to go in and out of the hospital. She already had a disease and she was an old person as well, so we knew there was a big chance of losing her. I particularly visited my grandma a lot while she was at the hospital. We always had a strong relationship and I enjoyed being with her. But she was very sick. In fact, she knew she was going to die, though she seemed at peace with it. And one Sunday, I went to visit Grandma and spent all afternoon with her. She was so tired, you can already tell. It was almost about time. She asked to speak to some people and said goodbye to them. And I remember telling her things would be fine, and she just peacefully smiled at me. And once the clock hit 6 p.m., I had to go back to my house to look after my daughter, because my husband, who worked at a different hospital, had to go to his night shift. As soon as I got home, I didn't even have the chance to say hello to my husband and my daughter. The phone rang as I entered the door. Since I was the closest one to the phone, I picked it up. And it was one of the most difficult calls I had ever had. It was one of my cousins telling me Grandma had passed away. I started crying. My husband and kid held me and supported me. And once I had enough energy to speak, I told them what had happened, and the two of them started crying as well. It's tradition where we live that the funeral lasts more than a day. So the next day and the day after that, we were at the funeral. My whole family was very sad, but at the same time we knew Grandma could no longer fight. And the following days, I did the same as always. Work, look after my home, my husband, and my daughter. And sometimes I would get sad, but I think that was pretty normal. Whenever I spoke to my sisters or my cousins on the phone, they would tell me about their dreams with Grandma, how Grandma told them this or that in a dream, how they started praying to Grandma for this or that, and it had happened. And I must admit, I started to feel influenced because of all of this. Many people had managed to say goodbye to Grandma but me, and I wanted to see her again. I wanted Grandma to visit me in my dreams. So one night, around a month after her death, I was home alone with my daughter. It was nighttime and my husband had to work that night. He was working 4 night shifts a week. My daughter would always sleep with me in my bed whenever my husband was away, especially when she felt scared. And that night, she was laying next to me. She watched TV, and then at 10 p.m. she fell asleep. And I continued to watch TV until midnight, and then I prayed. In my prayers, I asked for my grandma to appear in my dreams, and I asked for it with so much faith. And I eventually fell asleep. I don't know for how long until I was awakened. I felt something on my feet, and I tried to let it go, but I kept feeling it. It felt as if somebody was tickling me, and I was too tired to check. I just moved my feet and kept trying to sleep. And a few minutes later, I heard a noise. It almost sounded like a giggle. I woke up thinking there was someone in the house. I turned on the lamp next to me, grabbed the first thing I could to defend myself, and went to check around the apartment. I checked, but nothing seemed to be around. I grabbed the glass to get some water, and as I was filling it, I saw a shadow moving around the living room. I ran to the living room, but once again, there was nothing there. I checked one more time around the house, and still nothing. It couldn't really be anyone. It was a very safe neighborhood, and hearing about thefts was not normal in the area. And I thought it was just me being stressed. I went back to my room and laid next to my daughter once again. I checked the clock before sleeping, and it said that it was 2:45 a.m. And after doing this, I immediately fell asleep. Nevertheless, my sleep was disturbed once again. I kept feeling tickles and hearing chuckles. And this time, my first reaction was to open my eyes, and as soon as I did, I saw my Uncle Aaron and Granddad. They were at the edge of my side of the bed, tickling and playing with my feet. I first touched my eyes to see if I were dreaming, but they were still there. I slapped myself and started repeating to myself that this wasn't happening. And that's when they started speaking to me.
You asked for us, didn't you?
Uncle Aaron said, and I couldn't believe what was happening. I was absolutely disturbed at that point. I kept shaking my head and saying, "No, please, leave me, please," and I screamed. But that didn't stop them. They kept tickling me.
We're just hanging out,
Granddad said. And despite of them looking just like always, they were a little different. They were acting cheeky and playful, which was not a trait they normally had. Out of frustration, I started to cry. And that's when, from behind the door, Grandma showed up.
"Leave her alone,"
she demanded.
"I think she understands it now,"
she said. Then, she sat by the edge of the bed, looked at me, and talked to me.
"I love you, my dear, but please do not bring us back here. Excuse our behavior is not very much like us. Just don't bring us back. It disturbs our peace."
Those were Grandma's words. I looked at her, and then looked back at my uncle and Granddad, and they were all smiling at me. They looked gentle and nice once again, and all I could answer was okay. I do not have any more memories of the night. The next day, I woke up convinced it had all been a dream. After all, it was the most logical explanation. I sat on my bed thinking I couldn't believe it had happened. And I didn't even remember what happened after our conversation. It had to be a dream. That, where I was starting to go mental. I woke up my daughter and asked her to get ready for school. I started making breakfast, and once we were ready, my daughter and I sat at the table to eat. We were having a normal conversation until my daughter said, "Mommy, who was the other guy with Grandma and Granddad last night?" And then, I knew it wasn't only a dream, and I understood why Grandma said we should respect the dead.